When we talk about the 1857 revolt, there's this really interesting puzzle that honestly trips a lot of people up. We all learn that it started in one place, but the very first protest, it actually happened somewhere else entirely. So how does that work? How did one city get all the credit while the other one just faded into a footnote? Well, that's exactly what we're going to figure out. All right, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll look at the whole cartridge controversy, the spark that lit the fuse. Then we'll cover the early sparks of mutiny that kind of went nowhere. After that, we'll get to the main event, the turning point at Meerut. We'll see how a simple mutiny blew up into a massive revolt. And finally, we'll tie it all together and see why getting this right is so important, especially for your analysis. So here's the central question, right? History tells us plain and simple, the first protest was in Berhampur. But every textbook, every class says the Great Revolt began in Meerut. So what gives? Why the difference? Something must have happened between these two cities that completely changed the game. Okay, first things first. To get to the bottom of this, we've got to go back to the very beginning, the spark. Before the revolt, before any mutiny, there was just a rifle and a rumor. A rumor that would set the entire country on fire. So check this out. The British bring in this new piece of tech in 1856, the P-53 Enfield rifle. And here's the deal. To load it, you, as a sepoy, had to literally bite the end of the cartridge. Now, imagine the horror when the rumors start spreading that these cartridges are greased with cow and pig fat. For Hindu sepoys, the cow is sacred. For Muslim sepoys, the pig is forbidden. This wasn't just a simple misunderstanding, it was a direct attack on their faith, their identity, a massive, profound insult. All right, so as you can imagine, that insult did not go down well. The anger started simmering and then, it started to boil over. We see these little fires starting to pop up in a few different places. But, and this is the key part, they were just that, small, isolated fires. And the British were really good at stamping them out, one by one. Let's take a look. Okay, look at this timeline. It really lays it all out. In February 1857, boom, you have the first protest in Berhampur. A month later, in March, Mangal Pandey makes his stand in Barrackpore. Then in April, even the soldiers in Meerut refuse the cartridges. And the date we all circle in our history books, May 10th, that comes last. So right there, that's the proof. Meerut was definitely not the first. And here's why that matters so much. When the sepoys at Berhampur stood up, the British came down on them hard. They were disarmed, their regiment completely disbanded, done. When Mangal Pandey acted, he was on his own. He was captured and executed almost immediately. The British were making a point, a very brutal one. These were little fires, for sure, but they were contained. They were put out before they could connect with anything. And that brings us to Meerut. This is where the story changes. Maybe the British got a little arrogant after putting down those earlier protests, I don't know. But they totally miscalculated. Because in Meerut, the sepoys did something completely different. It wasn't just another angry outburst. Oh no. This was the moment a protest became a plan. This is where it gets really interesting. This chart really spells it out, doesn't it? On one side, you have Berhampur. It was a local protest, right? The British showed up, stamped out the fire, end of story. But Meerut, wow. The sepoys there made a brilliant, game-changing move. They knew if they stayed put, they'd be crushed just like the others. So they didn't. They decided to take the fire and run with it, to a place where it could become an inferno. And that place? It was Delhi. That decision, the march to Delhi, that single act is what changes everything. It's the one thing that separates Meerut from Berhampur, from Barrackpore, from everything that came before. This is what turned a bunch of scattered mutinies into a real, unified revolt. So let's break down this strategic masterstroke into 3 steps. 1. They don't stay put. They march straight for Delhi, the symbolic heart of India. 2, they don't just fight blindly, they find a leader. They go to the old Mughal emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar and say, "You're our leader." Instantly, this gives their movement a political goal and a sense of legitimacy. And 3, by taking Delhi and having a leader, they created a rallying point. A signal went out across North India and suddenly uprisings started happening everywhere. It was like a chain reaction. Seriously, just stop and think about that for a second. What if the sepoys in Meerut had just stayed there? If they just protested and waited? Well, they would have been crushed, for sure. It would have been another Berhampur, just a footnote in a history book. The Great Revolt of 1857 would never have happened. That march, that one strategic decision, was everything. Okay, let's tie this all up. Now, For anyone studying modern Indian history, especially if you're preparing for exams like the UPSC, this is absolutely crucial. This isn't just about memorizing that Meerut happened on May 10th, it's about understanding the why. It's about analysis. So, it all boils down to the difference between two words, mutiny and revolt. A mutiny, that's a local affair. An act of defiance, sure, but it's contained. Think Berhampur. A revolt? That's the big one. It's widespread, it has a political objective, it has a central point. Meerut wasn't just another mutiny. The sepoys there took their mutiny and ignited a revolt. They gave it a purpose, a leader, and a capital. And in history, what do we remember? We remember the turning point, not just the first complaint. There's a saying that really sums this all up. It is not the first spark that defines a fire, but the one that catches. And that's exactly what happened here. Berhampur was a spark, Mongol Pandey was a spark, but they just fizzled out. Meerut, that was the spark that landed on a pile of dry wood and started the wildfire we now call the Revolt of 1857. And so I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. We all agreed the greased cartridge was a major cause of all the anger. No doubt. But was it the catalyst for the revolt itself, or was the catalyst the march to Delhi? Thinking about the difference between a cause and a catalyst, well, that's one of the real keys to thinking like a historian.